Good luck. It's going to be good.
Hello, everyone. The participants go from the waiting room to the regular folks. As always, for those of you who are regulars, if you can just put in the chat box if you can hear me okay. Hello. It is right at noon, and as always, people are coming in. Oh, hi. Thanks, Laura and Lara and Richard and Lena and Sam. Yay. Thank you. We're so excited to be here today. Very special event. And Dr. Koplewicz and I were just chatting about flexibility, right? About how we have to be super flexible. We normally, for those people who, we have a very loyal crowd here. Some people, of course, I'm sure are just new. But a lot of the folks that are here have come to our monthly events. And so we hold these with specialists, authors, psychologists, psychiatrists. I mean, people that I, as a parent, would love to have, more information from. And so it's just been a really great experience. And, we have had many drops, many times we had to be flexible. And I think this audience is really lovely and supportive, and they understand that stuff happens. So
it's really interesting to me is I wrote The Scaffold Effect or Scaffold Parenting before COVID. And then COVID hit, and I actually had to do the Audible during COVID, which it really does sound impressive when someone says, oh, you're going to read your book. It's really a horrible experience for you. During COVID, you have to sit in a room by yourself, a glass in room, and they said louder, faster, slower. You mispronounce those words. But the reason I'm telling the story is that it really became clear that being resilient or being able to have your children be resilient and secure and and confident really required us to become flexible and recognize that we're living in this incredible pandemic that is extraordinarily challenging. And so, all of a sudden the scaffold effect and scaffolding parenting becomes much more essential to raising kids when things don't go well.
Absolutely. Well, you've done such a great job of an introduction, and it's now 12:02, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump in. And we have so much to cover. I wish we had multiple hours, but first of all, thank you so much for being here. And I will share with this audience that you have offered graciously for me to call you Harold after the initial introduction, so that we spend a little bit less time and
Yes,
and less stress for me.
Too many syllables. Yes.
So, of course, you are the founding president and medical director of the Child Mind Institute, and we definitely want to jump into the book. And I'm going to introduce you and introduce myself for those people who are new to Study Pro. We are an executive function and study skills center, and we really find it valuable to provide all of this expertise each month, as I was saying earlier, and ensure that we give a voice to experts around the world on all types of topics, authors and doctors and parenting specialists. And this has been just a tremendous community we've built. So we appreciate everyone being here. And of course, we appreciate Dr. Koplewicz being here. I also want to mention that this event was sponsored by a very generous parent from the Study Pro, the Rabbit Whalen Family Foundation. And we are very grateful for that sponsorship. Otherwise, we would not have this opportunity. And so we want to thank this generous sponsorship and just note it that it's something that I think she appreciated. Of course, everything Child Mind has done and everything that Study Pro has done, and really wanted to bring us together. So we're super grateful for that. And before we jump into this must-read book, as I said, you had founded Child Mind Institute in 2009, which you run, and is independent, nonprofit focused on child mental health. We have had many speakers here before, really putting a spotlight on this disturbing fact that 1 out of 5 kids in the United States has a mental health disorder. And compared maybe to physical health issues or other things like peanut allergies, we know that this is a huge challenge, and especially now with everything going on I don't know if we're post-COVID, but kind of waning COVID, and now with Ukraine, everything going on in the world, global warming, it may only get worse. So maybe for those of the not familiar, can you please tell us, introduce Child Mind Institute, because it's an incredible resource.
So thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, be with you. Um, so the Child Mind Institute is an independent nonprofit. For those of you who know about child psychiatry, there are 120 divisions or services of child and adolescent psychiatry at almost every academic medical center in the United States. Unfortunately, they don't make money. You know, they sell time. They have a lot of patients who can't afford the fees. And so child psychiatry is a service or a division in the Department of Psychiatry, which also doesn't make money. So you have two cost centers that are in $2 billion, $3 billion, $5 billion enterprises, which are healthcare systems. So inevitably, it's very challenging to do something innovative, something that will cost money and not make money when you're already seen as a cost center, not a revenue center. And we decided about 12 years ago that children's mental health disorders deserve the same kind of robust attention, the same kind of rigorous research, and the same kind of respect that we give physical disorders. And the model that we looked at was St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, which is a relatively small children's hospital. I think it's 78 beds, maybe it's 100 beds now, in Memphis, Tennessee, started by a TV star named Danny Thomas. And his concept was that no child should die in the dawn of their lives, and that you shouldn't burden parents with financial responsibilities during this terrible period. And someone was very smart and spoke to Danny Thomas and said it should be research, because without research, you will never get better treatments. And they have done an amazing job on tackling cancer, particularly pediatric leukemia, which 50 some odd years ago killed 94 out of 100 kids. And today, 4 out of 100 kids die from pediatric leukemia. And we realized that we needed to have that kind of focus, that kind of care for kids who have mental health disorders. Because while cancer is very important, and there's 15,000 kids in the United States who have childhood cancer, there's 17.1 million kids who have a mental health disorder. And that means that everyone listening to me and watching knows and loves one of these kids. So if it wasn't your son or daughter, it's your niece or nephew, it's your best friend from college's child, or it's your child's best friend. And unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of kids who have these disorders do not get care. Stigma, lack of access to care, not effective enough treatments have really limited the ability for parents to get the care their kids need. And the situation was bad before COVID, and COVID has just made the situation worse, because kids who have these disorders have become more symptomatic, and kids who don't have these disorders now do have mental health symptoms because they're more anxious, they're more worried, they're maybe more inattentive. So the nation has started to pay attention that children's mental health disorders are real, common, and treatable. And we're very proud at the Child Mind Institute, not only for the evidence-based care we give and the research we do, which is open science. We literally share our data before we publish. So thousands of articles are written on our data without individuals who have ever been to the Child Mind Institute, and our public awareness campaigns. So our website, childmind.org, has had 68 million people. And during COVID, we went from 500,000 unique visitors a month to 2.1 million unique visitors a month. And you should also note that we're an independent nonprofit, but we don't take money from the pharmaceutical industry, from guns, tobacco, or from liquor companies, so that parents should be able to come to us, get information, feel that it's scientifically sound, and that there isn't another agenda.
Yeah, and that childmind.org, Lindsay Toms, my business partner, and myself will tell you that we are all over it all the time. Get your newsletters. I really encourage everybody watching this to check it out. And you've done such an incredible job pivoting from during COVID, right, and really providing all of these resources, obviously virtually, and also changing the campaign to approach the topic of mental health disorders from, that perspective that I have it, to this idea that I can thrive with it. And do you want to just talk about that for a second?
Sure.
We thrive inside.
In 2017, we decided that we were going to do a campaign, basically a stigma busting campaign during May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And what we did in 2017 is we started to ask influencers and celebrities if they would give us a 1-minute video on their iPhone of what they would tell their younger self about their struggle with mental health or with a learning disorder. And that way, we would help kids and parents recognize that you can get through the tunnel. We were amazed with the participation. The first year, Emma Stone was May 1st, Jesse Eisenberg was May 2nd. May 3rd was then Lieutenant Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, about his own dyslexia.
Mm.
And May 4th, which I didn't know at the time, May the 4th be with you, we were trying to get Carrie Fisher to talk about her bipolar disorder, and she died from an overdose. So her brother, Todd Fisher, gave us a
Wow.
video talking about how her mother, Debbie Reynolds, really got involved in mental health care because of the diagnosis her daughter got as a teenager. So we kept doing these campaigns and recognizing that people that I thought were influential weren't really influential. I was excited to get Jay Leno, but if you showed Jay Leno to some young person, they would say, "Who's this guy with, a pointy
Right.
chin who has lots of cars?" They didn't know he was the Tonight Show, and I even know that Johnny Carson was the Tonight Show. So we pivoted in 2019 with getting more individuals who were influencers, people who had 5 million followers on YouTube, and kids were watching them. Names that, we decided that it was really important to have diversity, not only ethnically, racially, but also people on different spectrums, people who were trans, people who were gay, people who were bi, and make sure that we were getting to the demographic of our kids. We were starting to realize that not only reaching parents, but reaching kids from 12 to 24. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we started to realize that this was different. And we did a campaign called We Thrive Inside. How do we maintain our mental health while we're stuck inside the house or while the world is turned upside down? And that became our most successful campaign. We had 4 billion media impressions. And what was really important is we were giving resources to parents. We started doing Facebook Lives during COVID with 3 million people watching in English and another 100,000 for a Spanish version of a different parent session of Facebook Live. We started to realize that after George Floyd was murdered, parents need to learn how to talk about race and racism. And we started partnering with different organizations to provide them with the kind of conversations that they could lead with their kids, and how, if they got stuck, what were some of the appropriate ways to handle those kinds of conversations. And then the next year, last year, we did Getting Better Together. Believing that we were last May, that we were coming out of this, and now we had Omicron. So this year, our campaign in May will be Dare to Share. And we're going to get 15 very influential people and 15 kids who will tell us their stories about how there was something embarrassing or a mental health struggle or a learning disorder struggle, and how when they shared with their parent or with a friend or a teacher, they were able to overcome this obstacle or get onto the road to treatment or some type of recovery. So these campaigns, which are not typically done by child psychiatrists, have become very valuable to kids everywhere. And we hear about it we have a new program where we're working with a bunch of Greek pediatricians and Greek children's hospitals. And what they hear about is, oh, Emma Stone, do you know Emma Stone? And the fact that Emma Stone talks about her anxiety really alleviates the pain for lots of kids in Greece and elsewhere. So it turns out that the millions and millions of people who come to childmind.org are getting a lot of help without ever having to see us. We also have a symptom checker on Child Mind Health, which helps parents get some idea of what they think might be bothering or disturbing their kid before they pick up the phone to call a pediatrician for some help.
Wow. Well, I'm going to pause here for a second. I'm getting a little bit of feedback that maybe, is it possible to turn your volume up just a little bit, that my volume might be a little higher than yours? I know on my computer,
Sure,
I turned my volume all the way up. Let me know if that. Of course, now I probably ruined it because now I can't hear you at all. Oh, now I can't hear you. So everyone else that they can hear fine, but now I probably.
Now you can hear
Okay,
me.
now I can hear you perfectly.
You know what?
Okay.
I'll speak louder if that'll help.
Yeah, no, you're great. And I have to say that it's so important what you're doing. I mean, having raised a son on the spectrum, ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, and his journey, and just this, I was just talking to him the other day. He was in college and still struggles. But has come so far and just still struggles in some ways with mental health. And you know, he said he remembers his younger self, and he thinks about his younger self all the time, and just how powerful that is, and just to help normalize it. And I'll share this just quick story before we jump in your book, which is, a lot of times I hear from parents, I don't want to share with my student that they might have this thing that's a label, right? Whatever that label is. I hear that when I'm talking to parents because that might hurt them. But I will tell you that when my son was diagnosed with ASD, and I've heard this from other parents too, the psychiatrist asked him, or psychologist, excuse me, what would you think if I told you that? And he said, are you kidding me? I'm thrilled. I said, really? Why is that? He said, you think ADHD could do all this challenge that I have, with inflexibility, or, just sometimes my thoughts, right? And just, he was so relieved to hear. And I think part of it is really important to demystify and destigmatize this idea that mental health will make you feel less than or broken. I mean, because there is so much you can do about it, and there's so much valuable advice that you provide. Obviously, it's Child Mind Institute, but also in this amazing book. And as soon as I introduce,
just before we start with the book, you should know that there was a very famous physician named William Osler, and he said that the most important thing a physician should do is give a patient an accurate diagnosis. Because once you have that diagnosis, then treatment is possible. Because if you have a strep throat, you need an antibiotic. But if you have a cough and it's an allergy, then you need an antihistamine. And if you have a virus that's causing you to cough, you need rest and some tea. And if you have a scratchy throat, all you need is some salt water and gargle. And I think that, you know, parents sometimes are very worried about that diagnosis, but the diagnosis doesn't have to define you. The diagnosis is the same way you're still a wonderful human being who happens to have a diagnosis that we're going to treat. We're going to minimize the symptoms of that diagnosis. If we're not going to be able to get rid of the whole illness, cancer sometimes can be cured. Sometimes our disorders just get treated. But if they're treated, then the barrier to learning disappears, the barrier to being involved with other people, the barrier to having fun and play and be on a baseball field or a ballet class all become possible when we're able to focus or not be too worried and to be more present.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a really important point. And, what's I loved so much about the book is that you have this, brilliant analogy of scaffolding. So we have this up here, and I'm going to take it away so we can see you a little bit bigger. But I just want everyone to see that Scaffold Parenting is the name of the book, and the Scaffold Effect was the hard copy, right? But it's raising resilient, self-reliant, and secure kids in an age of anxiety. And I am going to stop sharing that so we can get a little bit bigger.
Great.
But what's brilliant about it, of course, is this analogy of scaffolding. And it's funny. My mother, every time I send a webinar invite, my mother will reply and say something beautiful. She's 85 years old. She'll say, "What a brilliant idea! I've never thought of that way." And I just visited her in Cleveland, Ohio this weekend. And she was saying, what a brilliant idea that, you are raising a child with these scaffolds, and we as parents have to decide what kind of scaffolds to bring up, how high, right? As you're saying, like how flexible, and then when to take them away. And so maybe what you can do, if you don't mind, is to give us the basics of the book. And what did you envision as scaffolding? And coming out of the book, what do you envision as scaffolding? And what does that mean for parents?
Well, I would tell you that first, I want to make sure that I give credit to the tens of, in fact, the 50 clinicians who were at the Child Mind Institute when I was writing that book. I think there's now 68 clinicians in both California and New York. But the idea was that parents talk to us all the time about how they worry about their kids. What will happen to my child when they go off to college? What will happen to my child when I'm no longer here? How will they become independent? How will they be, self-reliant? And that became this theme that we kept hearing about again and again. And it became clear to us that what we have been working with parents on is that they can't fix their kids. We can't fix their kids. We're not car mechanics. We can address symptoms and we can help them raise independent kids. And what happened is that the history of parenting has changed dramatically. You know, for many, many centuries, all you did was clothe your kid, house your kid, and hopefully send them to school. And then, you know, Benjamin Spock came around and he really wrote a terrific book, a pediatrician, about what was really going on with a kid. If a kid bit someone, you know, was the child hungry? Was the child angry? Was the child not able to express themselves? How do you address these kinds of things? Thinking about the fact that there was an emotional life that kids had that may be affecting their behavior. And then we went on to Penelope Leach and many others. But somewhere along the line, we decided the parents were responsible for their kids' happiness. And that's just not true. We are responsible to make sure they attend school now. We are legally responsible. We should make sure that they remain healthy and get them to the doctor when they have a cold or they have a rash. But it's not our job to make them happy. And in fact, we can't force happiness. We can't manufacture it. And so we got a whole bunch of parents that became helicopter parents, or I refer to them also as concierge parents, which, by the way, I fall into that all the time. Like, oh my goodness, you know, I talk to my children are all in their 30s. I have three sons who are in their 30s, and very often one of them will call up and they're just complaining about something, and I literally have to stop and say, I just want to understand. Do I have to fix this? Is there something I have to do, or are you just venting? And my oldest son, who's almost 39, said, Dad, I'm just talking to you. This is not your responsibility. He said, I'm no longer a work in progress. I'm done. It's perfectly all right. If I need your assistance, I will be very direct and ask you for a favor or for help. And so I think that by nature of our DNA, we want to rescue our kids. We want to protect them. And that doesn't make them independent. So if we think about a scaffold, it has pillars and it has planks. And as the building goes up, the scaffolding definitely changes. It may have to go higher, it may have to go lower, but the important part about those pillars is that there's encouragement, there's support, and there's structure. Think about, you know, I can encourage my kid. I can give them the kind of environment for good study skills. I certainly can give them the structure of going to sleep at a certain time and waking up at a certain time and meals at a certain time, but I can't fix them, right? And the building is going up. The architecture, the blueprint has been done. And maybe I expect a skyscraper and it's going to turn out to be a Victorian or a funky, you know, bungalow. But it's okay because I don't have to live in it. The kid has to live in it. And then you need planks. And the planks, of course, are things that we do naturally as parents. There's warmth, there's guidance, there is actually dispassion, which I'm terrible at. You know, I'm an overly enthusiastic cheerleader. And then when they're in trouble, I feel like I have to go in. And unfortunately, I share all my mistakes in this book because you can know everything and then you could still screw it up. And the good part about being a parent is it's like mulligans. You're allowed to take another, you know, you can do a redo. You can say, I made a mistake. We're going to have to redo that. And the other thing is you have to be able to do monitoring. You have to be able to watch the progress or the symptoms that are coming up and know what to do. If you do this correctly, first of all, the scaffolding does come down, right? The building comes up, but also it's also important that your kid now understands how to scaffold. They go off to college and they go to college with dyslexia. And so they realize they better stop at the study center, you know, the learning support center, because they're going to struggle when they have that first paper that's due. Or if they start getting depressive symptoms, they have to go and get a scaffold and go to the mental health clinic. So if we do our job correctly, the kids will learn to scaffold themselves. And that's what we really want them to do. I have to tell you that, you know, my oldest son, who I don't think I wrote about this, my oldest son decided when he was in 11th grade that he was going to become a DJ. This was not on any list we had for his occupation. I mean, and he was an outstanding student. He was in high school. I always thought that he should go to medicine because he loves science. He once said to me, Dad, I don't like blood. I'll end up being a psychiatrist. I'll always be the wrong Dr. Koplewicz. I said, that's the most ridiculous thing. I'm not going to go to medical school. But in 11th grade, this relatively shy kid decides he wants to be a DJ. And he pursues it the way people, when kids have a passion for something, it's really amazing. And he actually starts working with Mark Ronson, who was another
Wow.
white Jewish DJ who's now won the Academy Award with Lady Gaga, and a third guy named DJ Cassidy, who's still out there getting $25,000 to $50,000 for a performance. And so my son decided he wanted to be a DJ, and we decided we got to scaffold that. That means that when he had a gig once and he couldn't find a car service, my wife hopped in the car and drove him to Brooklyn for some junior prom that he was playing at. And we made sure that, he decided to go to Brown University. That seemed like the right place if you want to be a DJ. And somewhere along the line in his junior year, between his junior and senior year, he takes a position at a bank in New York, one of the, the brand name banks. And we think, what a mismatch. And he manages to get through the summer and he gets a job offer that he could, if he signs, they will hire him as soon as he graduates college, and they're going to give him $10,000. And he asks for my opinion. And I basically say, this doesn't make any sense to me. You're not a numbers guy. You're a creative guy. I thought you were going to go out to LA. And he basically said, no, I think I'm going to do this for 2 years and then I'll stop. And I started to realize we had to rescaffold. If that's what he wanted to do, we were going to be supportive. We weren't going to say we think it's a mistake. And by the way, he runs a private equity firm today. And he's super successful and he seems pretty happy. But he's living in that house. I mean, that's his house. It's not. I love being a child psychiatrist. I would love to do it again in a New York minute, but that's not for him. So I think all of us, and he's a relatively, as you can read from the book, he's a relatively healthy guy. He has some anxiety symptoms that seem to pop up all the time, but he has built a house that I help support, my wife helps support, but he's living in it. And I think that's really important for us to hold back. It's so hard, but not to dive in and try to fix it.
Yeah, I know. I love that story. And, I think that there's so many of us on this webinar today, being in this DC area, I'm sure you're in the New York area, right, where we understand this concept of concierge parenting. We want to be able to provide, the best for our kids, ensure they have the best opportunities, the best experiences, the best support. And, I guess there's a question, and maybe what's your advice or your thoughts about all of us who, why wouldn't we want to do that? Where do you see the balance between wanting all that for our kids and what might be best for them?
Right. So I think that we don't recognize that failure is an option, that it's an okay thing for kids to fail because, first of all, there is no permanent record card. When I was growing up, if you were bad, your teacher said she was putting on a permanent record card. It was going to follow you the rest of your life. And failing sometimes can make a kid study harder or study differently or approach a problem differently. And so, I think about there is a story in the book about comfort zones and growth zones and danger zones, and that kids and all of us as humans like to be in our comfort zone. We like to be with people that are like us, that think like us. And when we leave that and go into a zone which is growth, it sometimes makes us feel uncomfortable. And we'll stick with my oldest son. And my oldest son, who was really socially very, very reticent. In fact, when he was 7 years old, we were driving around doing errands, and NPR was on. It was an NPR show, and when we got home, he said, "Don't turn the radio off," because it was a show about social anxiety. And when we finished, when the radio program ended, turned the car off, and he turned to me and he said, "You don't really understand that. Mom and I understand that because Mom and I have to think before we speak. You and Adam, his younger brother, you don't have to think. You just talk to people." And so, I mean, it was really a wonderful insight that he shared with me, that he, was somewhat self-conscious at times in a way that his younger brother and me were not. Okay. And that me and the younger brother were not. So, he's in fifth grade and he comes home and he announces to us that he is going to perform at the Thanksgiving Day assembly at the school, which is for the entire middle school, which goes from fourth grade to eighth grade. And he is going to do a rap dance in honor of Michael Jordan, who he adored. He had photographs of him. He had posters all over his room with his friend Adam, different Adam, and they were going to perform. And My wife, who was as socially reticent as him, said, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea." And I said, "Well, have you thought about it? I'm thinking it's a disaster. He's gonna perform in front of the whole middle school. He's gonna be labeled quickly uh, and endorsed as some, kid who does these weird things. And he has another 4 years of middle school. It's the kind of thing that patients talk about to me for decades." And he said, "No, no, it's great. I've been working with the dance instructor, and she's choreographing it, and we're going to use crisscross as the music, and it's going to be great." I certainly started thinking about the danger zone, right? This is not the growth zone. This is the danger zone. There's a lot of risk here. My wife said to me, "What are you worried about?" So what happens? He fails. He makes a complete fool of himself. No one ever died of embarrassment. And I'm thinking, this is so amazing coming from her, where I'm out there all the time. And she's, really holds back a lot. And 2 days or 3 days before the performance, he comes home and says, "Adam backed out." And I said, "Well, it wasn't meant to be. Not everything is, no, 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 I'm going to do it by myself." And I'm thinking, this is, why don't you do open heart surgery on the stage? But I didn't say any of that. That was inside. And so the day came, it was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, because they were off on Wednesday. My wife happens to be still a middle school art teacher at that school. So she was in the back of the auditorium. There was no way I was going, but I see lots of patients during the day, and I was running a big division. And so I called her maybe an hour later, and she said, "Oh, it was wonderful. He was outstanding. People loved it. He was so confident." And she's so pro, Joshua. I didn't know if it was true or not, but it wasn't bad. Whatever it is, she said it was great. I knew it wasn't bad. Fast forward 20 years. We're at his 30th birthday party, and he's thrown this big party, and his best friend gets up there and he says, "Hi, everyone, I'm Elias. And, everyone knows I don't like to do public speaking, but, I've known Joshua since middle school, and we went to college together, and we've been living together now for the last 7 years. And I love Joshua, so I'm going to speak." And Joshua doesn't know this, but the first time I laid eyes on him, I was in fourth grade, and I was at the Thanksgiving Day middle school assembly, and they announced that Joshua Koplewicz from House 52 was going to do an interpretive dance in homage to Michael Jordan. Do you hear how it all changes? And he said, "I even knew in fourth grade that was social suicide." The lights were off, a spotlight went on. There was Joshua wearing a baggy basketball uniform from the Bulls, Chicago Bulls, wearing a baseball hat backwards, and the crisscross starts playing, and he starts dancing, and he's spinning around on the floor, and he flips over, and everyone goes wild. Everyone stands up and starts screaming, "Go Josh, go Josh." The whole thing lasted, he said, 10 minutes, and he walked off the stage. I saw him again on Monday, and there he was, as unobtrusive as ever, carrying too many books, with his head down. And he said, "I talked about this dance performance to my parents endlessly, about how brave Josh was. I can't believe how brave Josh was." And I sat there at this 30th birthday, and I kept thinking, I came so close to saying, "Please don't do this. This is too risky. Trust your father. Don't do this." And that's what I was talking about, this rescuing our kids. So if your kid is willing to go into the growth zone or willing to take a risk, it's our job. Scaffold them, give them encouragement, give them support. And if they do fail, we're there again to give them support and structure and encouragement and warmth and guidance. But trying to save them can sometimes, I thought to myself, how many kids looked at Josh and felt braver because of his risk taking? And frankly, I think it was that performance that made him think that he could become a DJ later on, that he could stand up in front of people, where chit chat is very hard for him, but performance wasn't.
I mean, what a great story. I have so many similar stories that I could share with my son rapping and things like that. And the truth is, I think I've come to learn, and I share with my daughter, that embarrassment can be a choice, right?
Yeah.
We can choose whether we're going to be embarrassed or not, because embarrassment is this feeling that we have about what we're supposing other people are thinking of us, right? And you've talked about these ideas of tolerance and exposure, and that tolerance and exposure help to reduce anxiety, right? It helps us to get through the tough stuff. We can't learn to get through the tough stuff and reduce our anxiety without some kind of tolerance and exposure. And you've kind of said this in the last few minutes, that we as parents, we don't want to see our kids fail, but it is exactly that failure that allows the kids to build, the thicker skin and the sense of confidence and, this ability to feel, I know how to solve these problems by myself. And so we can't be those helicopter and concierge parents all the time, because we really need, our kids to build up those scars, that scar tissue, right? And that sense of build that muscle that, I can make mistakes, and then I can use strategies, or I can use some other way to get through that. And, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that concept of tolerance or exposure.
Let's think about it from a treatment perspective. So when you have kids who have selective mutism, children who talk to mom and dad, may talk to one friend, but they're so pathologically self-conscious, they're not talking to others. And what happens typically is parents become, the ventriloquist. You ask the kid, do you want ice cream? Yes, he likes ice cream. Well, what flavor? Are, strawberry or chocolate? He likes chocolate. And what we are supposed to do is ask the question. And if the kid doesn't answer the question, you say, well, I guess you don't want ice cream, right? So the consequence of not speaking is you don't get ice cream. And if you can, so what we do for a whole week, and we see kids from all over the country who come with selective mutism, is that we put them in a simulated classroom, and very slowly we keep reinforcing, whether they nod their head, whether they point to something, and they vocalize, and so that they are communicating with strangers, because selective mutism is like a pathological state of social anxiety. By the end of 5 days, where they've been exposed to a policeman, a clown, a dentist, all the things that cause them to be phobic, we have them ordering ice cream from a stranger at an ice cream parlor, or saying hello to a stranger in Central Park. Now, it's not a real stranger, it's a Confederate stranger, it's one of us. We're not trying to expose them to danger, but the parents can't get over the fact that their kid is actually initiating conversations or willing to participate in a conversation. And what we've done is we've made them uncomfortable, but really in a very gradual, encouraging way, so that by the end of 5 days, it's a transformative experience. And then we teach the parents how they can keep doing this, because parents, I think that's the important part about the scaffold effect and the scaffolding parenting, is the whole idea that parents are part of what makes things better. Parents do not cause kids to be mentally ill. They don't cause kids to have dyslexia or a learning disability, but parents can make things better. You can find a great reading program. You can read to your kids regularly. You can make sure that the barrier that they're experiencing with reading, it can be climbed over. And the same thing for anxiety or ADHD or depression, but they don't cause it. When I wrote a book in 1996 called It's Nobody's Fault, New Hope and Help for Difficult Children and Their Parents, I got letters from colleagues saying, okay, so autism is not caused by parents. Well, I said, well, 25 years ago, Rudolf Bettelheim said refrigerator moms or icebox moms caused autism. It's not, it's brains. It's brains that don't have the same language and speech centers, and that kids don't socially join. It has nothing to do with whether your mother picked you up or not. And they said, well, what about depression? Mothers definitely cause depression. I said, really? I said, your mother can be depressing, but she doesn't give you depression unless you have a family history for it, and you can't be blamed for your genes. But parents can make things better. And the scaffold parenting is the idea that it's a work in progress. We sometimes have to hold back our natural desire to fix it, and to be able to enjoy the fact that this wonderful building is coming up that might be a DJ, might turn out to be a private equity guy. And, in my case, I didn't get a child psychiatrist, but I got, 3 kids who seem to be very happy with where the house they've built and where they're living. And if they're not happy with it, it's kind of their job now in their 30s to renovate. They have to figure out, if this isn't working out, whether it's finding another mate or finding another job or getting some more passion in your life, becomes their responsibility, not the parents.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have this saying at the Study Pro that we talk a lot about on our webinars. When we actually stole it from a psychologist, we give him full credit, Dr. Jonathan Dalton, but it's about watering the seeds and not the weeds. And how do we water the things that we want to see grow? And when we're talking about in the concepts of executive function, of course, those are, the strategies that we want to help them grow versus the current behaviors maybe that they're experiencing. And so, you talk about that in the book a lot, speaking of things parents can do to help guide your students, you talk about this in the concept of like negative tracking, which springs out of parents' good intentions and goodwill, right? But centers on pointing out things that aren't being done correctly. So
Right.
maybe you can talk about why are we inclined to do that, and then how could we take a different approach?
So I would tell you, we all do this now. And people who are, during COVID, we watched a lot of TV or a lot of streaming. So something called confirmation bias, right? That if you really have a very conservative Republican point of view, there's a very good chance you're watching Fox News. And the reason why you're doing that is you want to confirm that what you believe and what you think is accurate. And the TV moderators tell you that. And if you're lean all the way to the left, you might be more comfortable with MSNBC because they're confirming your bias. That happens with our kids also. But we're also very good at telling you what's wrong with this picture. And so what happens is that we get an idea that we have a lazy child, or we have a super jock child, or we have a klutzy child. He's not athletic, or she's not athletic, or she's not very bright. And we start tracking behaviors that confirm that bias. And so it's not good for the child who's been marked as lazy. And it's certainly not good for the kid who's been marked as smart and energetic and ambitious, because inevitably she or he is going to fail the parent. And inevitably, the self esteem of the lazy kid is not going to be very good. They're not going to be risk takers because they've already been seen as a non functioning student or, a poor student. So, what we recommend to parents all the time is that it takes 6 weeks to change this behavior, but you'll see results in 2. What we want you to do is track all behavior. And that means that for 2 weeks, you're tracking all behavior your kid has. And we want you to do 3 things. We want you to catch your kid being good. So when your kid has helped you set the table and it's done a nice job, or help clean up the table, even if you have asked 4 times, what we want you to do is thank you so much for cleaning up the table. And you did such a good job, and it's made my life so much easier, and I really appreciate it. People don't talk this way. We want you to talk this way. We want you to actively ignore the fact that they're off task. So if you ask them 2 or 3 or 4 times to do something, we don't want you to say, are you deaf? How many times do I have to tell you this? We just want you to ignore it and just repeat the command. Also, if the underwear is on the floor of the bedroom and they haven't picked it up, we want you to actively ignore that. That's an insignificant off-task behavior. Now, they curse at you, they are rude to you, they hit their brother or sister. Clearly, that's egregious behavior. Then you can intervene. But if you actively try to catch them being good for 2 weeks, 2 things happen. One, your kid is going to think that someone captured their mother and aliens have taken them, because this can't be my mother. They can't believe it's happening. But you're going to start finding in the 3rd week, the 4th week, your kid is going to give you more and more positive behaviors that you can praise. Because as humans, we like to do well. As humans, we like our parents to think highly of us, and we love our teachers to think highly of us. We've taken these techniques and put it into 600 school districts across the country, where we teach a teacher that, for instance, you give certain commands. I want you to raise your hand. I'm only going to call on you if you raise your hand. And then you say, the question is, who discovered America? Someone screams out Christopher Columbus. The teacher actively ignores the answer and goes to the first person who's raised their hand and says, thank you for raising your hand. I really appreciate it that you're following the instructions. Who discovered America? And they say Mickey Mantle. No, that's not the right answer, but thank you for raising your hand. And they keep doing that until they find someone who's raised their hand, who gives them the answer they want, which is Christopher Columbus. What happens to the class is the class all wants to be praised. So the next day, everyone's raising their hand. And that continues as long as you have reinforced that positive behavior and you're saying positive things. Thank you for raising your hand. I appreciate that you followed the instructions. And while it takes 6 weeks to redraw that blueprint, it's so rewarding after the 2nd week, because all of a sudden you start, first of all, it's exhausting to constantly be tracking negative behavior. Sit up, but don't talk with your mouth full, put your napkin on your lap. Did you do your homework? It changes the whole conversation if you're trying to be positive. And by the way, if you do this with your employees or you do this with your spouse, it will help their relationships also. People like to be praised. They don't want to be taken for granted. And basically, as parents, we take for granted the good behavior, the on-task behavior, and we feel that we have to keep pointing out the negative because we want to make them better, it actually has a reverse effect.
Oh, I wish I'm going to have to cut that little bit right there and just throw that on our website, because we say that here all the time, right? When we're developing new behaviors, we have to focus on the development, as small as it is, the littlest thing. Oh, it was amazing that you planned your workout today, right? We planned your homework today versus, maybe you didn't get it all done. So, I mean, those things are just so important. And I think you will see a change in your spouse and your employees and everything. It's so true. I'll just share that I was thinking the other day, I get up very early in the morning and exercise because it's on the self-care list, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yes.
But,
Yep.
It's so important. And my trainer who does it virtually with me now was like, boy, you really, showing a lot of stamina today. And I wasn't feeling like I did. But because he said that to me, the whole rest of the workout, I was like, well, I have to show that I'm, feeling stamina today. And it's so true. I mean, you get what you praise, right? And it's exactly the story you told. And I just had that experience actually literally this morning. So, there's another great strategy or concept that you talk about, which is is an important parenting skill called small talk. And do you want to talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah. So I think that there's lots of versions of this, but I think there are big talks, right, that we have about sex, about life, that we make a big deal about, but the fact of the matter is they really have to be long-term conversations. They have to be conversations that you're really focusing on what the child understands, and being very careful not to answer questions that they're not asking, so that this can be a dialogue that will go on. But small talk, and really refers, particularly for a doctor, is that I found myself that if you wanted to talk to kids who are 8 or 7 who really liked a lot about sports, right? I had to read a lot about sports because I'm not naturally don't watch sports, and I was trying. So if I'm a good doctor, I try to find a language that I can connect with my kids. And in the scaffold parenting, we talk about that you should talk to kids on their level. So if you're up here on the scaffold shouting down, it's not going to be very effective. So as a parent, it really is important for you to understand where your kid is living, what TV they're watching, what are the programs, what are the things they like to do at sports, what are they learning about in school. And if you would treat your child the same way that you would treat a customer, because when you engage with a customer, you want to make sure that you're engaging with them. So you ask questions that aren't going to give you the no, I don't know, yes answers that are kind of end the conversation. And so being able to engage your kid in small talk really opens up their world, that they see you're interested, and B, you get to find out what's going on. Now we'll go back to Joshua for a second, a very quiet kid. We say, what was the best part of school? If you asked him, what did you learn today in school, he'd say nothing. I would say, okay, it's private school, I want my money back. He would laugh. But if you also said, what was the most exciting part of the day? What was the most boring part of the day? You would get, and it was still hard. And I found that we needed a different setting. There were too many kids. We have 3 children. They were noisier than him. My wife is quiet, but I'm pretty noisy. So we got up every morning when he was in middle school, and we started jogging around Central Park. And by nature, I don't love waking up early in the morning, but if you went around twice, by the second time we were going around the reservoir, he would tell me something about what was going on in his life. And I was very careful not to jump on it. You don't think about the customer. If you jump on it, the customer stops talking. So if you say, hey, thank you for sharing that. That sounds like it was really exciting, or that was fun. And then he could say, no, it wasn't fun. It was pretty scary. But you keep it open-ended. And it really is interesting that most parents will say, why do I have to do that? My parents never did that. Well, I don't think the way our parents parented us is necessarily the best model. My father passed away when he was 95 and a half, and he was an Eastern European Holocaust survivor. And he was an exceptionally tough father. He was so worried that there was going to be another Holocaust. So if I wasn't a good student, if I didn't have enough in my brains, because if I had to move, what would happen? And that anxiety, fortunately, decreased over time, so that when he was a grandparent, he was he was a scaffold grandparent. He was supportive, he was encouraging, he went to their soccer games and their tennis matches while I was taking care of someone else's child. And so he was really present for them. But he once said to us while we were having lunch with my second kid, and we were having lunch on a Saturday, and just the three of us, he said to my second kid, your father is a much better dad than I was. And and my kids adored him and said, "Why would you say that, Grandpa?" He said, "Because your father just asked you after lunch, what do you want to do? Do you want to go for a boat ride? Do you want to go on the Ferris wheel? Do you want to go to a toy store? What would you like to do?" He said, "It would never have occurred to me to ask your father. I would have said, do you want to go with me to the factory? Do you want to work in my workshop with me?" It didn't. And I was, first of all, amazed that he had the insight to see that difference. But it also, parenting has changed. I don't think we should hover. I don't think we should helicopter. But if you want to engage your kids, if you really want to be the scaffold, you have to know what's going on in their head, because there's no way you can have an influence unless you know where you're starting from.
Yeah, I mean, it's that reflective listening that you're talking about is so important. And, the other piece that I thought of you when I was sitting on the ground underneath our kitchen table on the floor, watching my daughter's TikToks with her, because you were talking about like listening to the radio,
Right.
listening to the songs they want to listen to, thinking in my brain how not interested I was in that moment in listening to those particular
Well, that's kind
TikToks.
of small talk. You're living
That's
where
small
they,
talk.
right.
You're
When
living your,
someone told me
yeah.
recently that Child Mind Institute, we're on Facebook, we have 120,000 likes. We're on Instagram, we have 145,000 followers. And someone said we have to be on TikTok. So I went and looked at TikTok, and it just seemed like half naked, very pretty looking people throwing things at each other, doing stupid things. And it took a banker from Morgan Stanley, who's a funder of ours, to say, "You're not looking deep enough. That's the next place where, if you want to get a message out that child mental health disorders are real, common, and treatable, you better figure out how to talk to people through that." And so,
Yep.
if I said, "Well, my father never would have done that," well, okay, there was no internet. There was, my father thought comic books were dangerous. I now know that social media is dangerous. That we have to be very careful with what our kids are seeing and how we monitor.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, my kids learn so much positive things actually from TikTok as well, and a lot of the positive strategies that both of them use, they've learned from that. And speaking of positive, there's one more concept that I wanted to cover too. And if you guys have questions out there, we can start thinking about those, because I think we'll have a few extra minutes. But I love this idea that you discuss about making memories. And, if you have a moment to make positive memories, you should take that for your kids. And, I know we all as parents would love to know how to do that. How do we make memories beyond what we maybe think of already?
Right. So I think there are many different ways of doing it, but you need to help your kid make that memory. So I'll tell you the goofy stuff that I did. I made a point, since I work so much, that I would take my kids on a business trip with me every year. So there were at least 3 business trips. So sometimes it would be to Indianapolis or to Boca Raton, or somebody wanted to hear me talk in LA. And as soon as we got there, and it was only one kid at a time, we'd rent a car. And inevitably, whether it was cold or hot, I would rent a convertible. And I'm not a car person, but we'd rent a convertible. We take the car, the roof down, we blast the music that they picked, and they will tell you how goofy their dad was, that when they traveled with them, there was something carefree about it. You mean it was something kind of wonderful. The other part about making memories is catching them. So on one of these trips, I was walking with Joshua on the beach, because the conference was at the beach. He was in some child program during the day, and then in the afternoon we had this ability to walk on the beach, and it was in Florida. And he said to me, "Can you imagine what it would be like to live in Florida all the time?" And because I wasn't connecting, I said, "You mean you want to retire like grandma and grandpa?" And he said, "No, just wouldn't it be fun to live here in Florida and have the beach and the ocean?" I said, "Do you want us to move to Florida?" And he said, "Dad, don't you know how to imagine?" And basically he was sharing with me, we this joyous moment we had where there was no school, there was no work, and we were walking on the beach. So he was saying, "Live in the moment, Dad. Just imagine what this would be like if we could do this more often." And I think, capturing that and putting your arm around your child and saying, "Wouldn't it be wonderful? I love this moment. Can we race now on the beach? Let's see if we can have a race." Setting it up so either he'll win or you win, but making sure those memories happen, and then repeating them, being able to share them once you get home and say, "We had a great time." And it wasn't just a great time. There's some real specifics here that we'd like to talk about. And so the memory can be different for them versus for you, but you want to make positive memories. And whether, it's kind of amazing how my father, more than my mother, did that with my kids, whether it was, spending a time with them, inventing some, cockamamie invention that they were going to get a patent on, which they never did, but spent hours drawing these kinds of things, or whether it was picking up one of my kids to go to language therapy, speech and language therapy on Tuesdays and Thursdays once he was done with school, and then taking them for a milkshake. And that my 36-year-old son still talks about it and says, oh, I remember that grandpa. And think about it from a grandparent's point of view, you would think, would that really be a memory? And it can be a memory if you do it right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My grandmother used to come over and make macaroni cheese with extra cheese on top. I was just talking with my father about that this weekend. But we can't leave without talking about one last concept, which I alluded to earlier, which is really about the idea, we often say also that we can't ask our kids to do things that we're not doing. So we can't tell our kids, don't get so mad about this or don't whatever when we're not doing it. And so you talk a lot about that in the concept of, self-care and making sure that self-care is childcare. So I'd like
And
before we
more so now than ever before. But before COVID, when I wrote the book, I talk about that the scaffolding itself has to be secure. If it is not secure with the cement, footing, and if something catastrophic happens and it's not a secure scaffold, the whole building falls down. Now we have catastrophe, we have COVID, right? So how do we secure the scaffold? How do we take care of ourselves? And think about those airplane rides where they always tell you, put the mask on yourself before you put it on your kid, which empirically never makes sense to me. Oh my God, would I really let my kid gasp for air? But if you are not breathing in and breathing out, you don't have the energy to put it on child number one or child number two and secure it tightly and make sure it's working effectively. This is the moment, even now, as COVID is fading and we're a little uncertain, will it come back? And we're learning to live with it as an endemic instead of a pandemic. It's really important that we sleep 7 hours a night minimum. Stop Netflix, stop looking at your iPhone, go to sleep for 7 hours. Make sure that you are exercising every day for 20 minutes. Now, you don't have to be as good as you. You could just take a walk for 20 minutes. I'd really rather your heart race a little bit, so walk a little faster. 20 minutes. Do something mindful or spiritual every day. So if you're not going to church or synagogue, then get an app like Calm and do some really just relaxation and mindfulness. Start with 5 minutes, get to 20 minutes. And last, eat something green. I mean, during COVID, we got hunks, chunks, and drunks. Hunk left my room a long time ago. So, I've been fighting off being a drunken chunk. But if your son and daughter see that you're watching your diet, you're not eating a lot of carbs, and that you're being mindful, you're getting your amygdala to calm down for 20 minutes, that you have to be alone to do that, that you do go to sleep at a certain time and take care of yourself, that you do exercise, that modeling is terrific. But more importantly, you have the strength to truly be a scaffold parent. You can, take a breath in and a breath out because you've securely put that mask on your face.
Yes, everybody, we have to fill our buckets. Of course, I'll say especially moms, but that's not.
But dads are not good at it too. There's
Including
always
dad.
another client. There's always another meeting. And
Yeah.
moms, by the way, moms are working. Most moms today are working and they're moms. And I'm a pretty good dad, but there's no comparison to how much extra my wife did besides what she was doing at work. So
Yeah. Well, we have a bunch of questions. I know we don't have very much time, but there was one in particular about making memories with older kids, in this case, a high school junior. A lot of these kids just want to play video games. They don't necessarily want to do things with us. What kind of advice do you have there?
well, first of all, here's a good example, which is college. So college can be an incredibly stressful application process, and you can have fun with it. So whether it's the trip that you're planning to go take to see colleges, or the trip that you're going to examine just by looking at videos and saying and having fun with it. There doesn't seem to be any ugly students in American colleges right now. How is this possible that everyone is tall, skinny and blonde? Where are the guys with the black curly hair? But just making it a little humorous again can help you make memories. Also, your son or daughter can get into routines. I think routines are really important. So, Sunday Sunday dinners. Blue Bloods, they always show you the Sunday dinner. It could be Friday night dinner. It could be Sunday brunch. But a routine where, yes, we always have macaroni and cheese on Sunday night. We always have bagels on Sunday morning. Or we always go to the park, as a family on Sunday morning before we go to church or before we do anything else, so that it gives you that space that you can do it. Now, it's always hard to start these things when kids are in high school because they don't want to be with you a lot of times. They like to be on their phone. They like to be with their friends. But if you ask them for 20 minutes and it's fun, whether it's getting a slice of pizza, whether it's going to get some ice cream, whether it's going to the mall together and just walking around inside the mall to get some exercise, you can find something. And you also know your kids. You know what they like. You know how, think of it as a client again. You know exactly, certain clients need a lot of hand holding, certain clients don't. Certain clients would respond to a present, certain clients wouldn't. I mean, I think it can be done in a very positive way where you start off short and sweet, and you don't tell them you're going to do it every week. So if it worked out, you say a few days later, let's do that again. Chances are, again, if it's short and sweet, it can work.
Yeah, and it's just really about having that patience, watering those seeds.
Yes.
Maybe letting them choose whether they want the mac and cheese or the bagels or whatever they want for the Sunday family
Well,
dinner.
I actually have a patient years ago. He's now 30. Now he's, oh my God, he's close to 45, 50, and he has kids of his own. He sits on the board of the Child Mind Institute. And he reminded me that when he was a kid in his house for breakfast on your birthday, you could have whatever you wanted. So, someone would have lasagna for breakfast or steak and potatoes or ice cream. And that memory has lasted in that family, now for, 45 years or, 40 years. And I think that it sounds silly at the time, but it's that family's routine that became, something fun that they kept talking about.
Well, I have to say, as we're wrapping up here, I want to be respectful of your time and everyone. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but what is so incredibly effective about this, what I consider a must-read book, is that instead of just giving theories and general ideas, you really give so much specific advice that's actionable. And I know that speaking on behalf of all of these parents, this and the childmindinstitute.org is such an incredible resource. So Scaffold Parenting, Raising Resilient, Self-Reliant, and Secure Kids in the Age of Anxiety. I still have to say Dr. Koplewicz because I can say it all in one word. With my husband's name is Mordecai, so I can say Koplewicz, so we're good. I really appreciate it. I mean, you're so engaging, and this has been so incredible for parents. And thank you, Alice, for sharing that you have ice cream and toast for weekends on breakfast too. We appreciate it.
Well, by the way, it's been an honor and a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been phenomenal. So we really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody. We are recording this. We will send it out. And I hope everybody has a great day and weekend. Thank you again.